hello, Recovery fam. Welcome back to the Unashamed Recovery podcast, where we believe there is healing in the story of our scars and that it is okay to not be okay.
It is our mission to break the shame and stigma of addiction in recovery by sharing real stories of real addiction from real people in real recovery and real sobriety.
We share stories straight out the pit, stories of hope.
I'm your host, Josh.
I'm your co-host, Drew.
And I put the fun in dysfunctional. I'm Palmer.
And roll that intro.
The Unashamed Recovery Podcast.
That's how it's done.
The Unashamed Recovery Podcast.
The Unashamed Recovery Podcast with Josh, Drew, and Palmer starts now.
What is up, recovery family? This is Palmer back for another episode of Unashamed Recovery Podcast. Today's going to be a little different because I am the only host here. That's right. I got tired of the other guys doing shows without me and decided I'll just run on over to the beautiful Audio Alchemy studio and do my own show with their title. But today we got a special guest. He's an absolute best friend of mine, and he really helps me with my spiritual walk and just one of the best friends that a man could ask for. My good friend, Mr. Grady Lynch. What's up, Grady?
What's up, Palmer? Thank you for having me, brother.
How you been, sir?
I'm doing good, Just enjoying this beautiful studio you got
Man,
here.
isn't it beautiful? Daniel, the D-man, he has done an amazing job over here at Audio Alchemy. Always sounds and looks as beautiful as it can be. And so we appreciate him letting us come in today. Last minute, this was an idea I had literally at like 7 o'clock last night. I said, well, we don't have an episode that we've recorded this week. And I figured, well, I ain't have nothing better to do. Why don't I call up my good bud Grady and let's just have a conversation. Now, Grady, just for our listeners that are usually in either a recovery-based program or a faith-based recovery program or anything like that, that's usually our clientele, our customers, our family, our friends that listen to this podcast.
Awesome.
But that's not your story. Your story does not have a true recovery theme to it. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. It's more of what we talked about, a Jesus story. It's more of a God story. So I figured since it's just going to be us and we're just having a conversation, I figured it'd be a great time to do something different for our listeners. I feel like there are so many, especially I'm a part of two podcasts, this one, Unashamed Recovery Podcast, and the Black Sheep Recovery Warfare Podcast. And so there's a lot of recovery talk out there. And sometimes we forget that, some of our listeners are either family or friends of people that are recovering, or they're just Christians that want to hear other stories and be blessed and understand their own Christian walk because of somebody else's story. And so I felt like your story would definitely be a great switch for our listeners. So Josh likes to say, take us to chapter 1. I'm just going to say, Tell me about let's start with your childhood. Obviously, I know that's chapter 1, but I know that, and I know a lot of your story, but the listeners do not. So let's start at the beginning. Obviously, we're not starting with conception, but we're going to start at the beginning of, I guess, trauma, because we have noticed in this recovery podcast world that trauma usually is one of the biggest factors of people getting into drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. So let's start there. Let's start with your first memory of what truly started changing your life and leading you down the path that eventually got us to God.
Well, let me just say this. I grew up in a church family. My father was in church. My mother was in church. I grew up in a great household. The American dream, I guess you would say, is what you would want out of parents. When I got to know, I guess you say, the trauma that happened in my life was when my father,
for lack of a better term, passed away from his own actions.
Yeah, my father passed away from his own actions. I was 10 years old, man. That was tough. He was my best friend. just imagine being 10 and not having your dad around, just going to baseball practices, you name it, man. It sent me down to shell shock.
So up until that point that this happened, I mean, you and your dad had a great relationship. There was, I know the cliche is, did your mom see any signs? Did you see any signs? I mean, did dad seem like he was depressed or over life, basically? Just, I mean, what was going on that did you see anything that might have been going on?
Man, that's the craziest thing about it is I didn't see any signs. He was happy. He was at ball practices with me. He was dancing in the car the week before. I mean, it was just a complete shock.
So that's the amazing part of this story that I think a lot of people need to understand is so many people get caught up in the details of, man, I should have known. And man, sometimes you just don't know. You don't know what people are going through. That's why we try to tell people all the time, be nice to everybody because you don't know what they're going through. Exactly. I mean, they could be having the worst day of their life and they accidentally take it out on you and you're just like, well, that person's a jerk. Well, no, that person's going through life. So, all right. So we lose our father, 10 years old. And what happens then? Like, I mean, obviously I don't imagine that you're started to drink and smoke marijuana at 10, but I know we eventually get there. So like, tell me a little bit about what happened after Dad's gone.
Man, it was such a shock for me. It kind of sent me down a downward spiral. I had two brothers. It actually, I was in shock. Like, I really don't remember much about from 10 to about 15.
Yeah.
Thank God for counseling. My mom put me in some counseling. I had a great counseless that worked with me weekly.
Is that a word, counselist?
Counselor.
Did you make that up?
I probably made that up.
Nice.
I'm pretty good about that.
I love made up words. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And, man, it was, I did dabble, smoking cigarettes. Like I said, I had three brothers smoking weed, you name it. Just trying to find something to numb it, went down I would say through my teenage life, just going down a bad path, living for the flesh and, you name it, chasing women and.
Yeah, this is kind of when you get into the lifestyle of
motorcycles.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. The extreme lifestyle. Because I've seen a couple videos. I've heard your stories of being on what we call crotch rockets. I don't know the actual name, term for that style of motorcycle, but what we call crotch rockets. And you're doing wheelies and
traveling around, man, doing shows and stuff like that. I would do anything to be on a bike.
And honestly, like maybe you didn't realize it at the time, but like you'd already been through that trauma of death. Mm-hmm. And so like
I didn't care.
You didn't care, but you're almost taking yourself to that limit to see how close I can get to it before I go over that line. If I go over that line, I don't care. I mean, I've already lost the most important person in my life at this point.
That was
so,
it.
All right. So we're 15 years old. Is this when drinking and marijuana come into the play?
I would say, yeah, maybe even before.
And is that because of, we're not blaming your brothers or anything like that, but I mean, is it because you had because you're the baby, right?
I'm the baby.
All right. So is it because your brothers are older and you probably have older friends who are doing all this? And so you're kind of like, well, that looks cool.
Yeah. I would say that, just, they're always having parties, your mother's, you got a single mom at home, she can only keep up with so many people, and,
right.
And, I wanted to fit in with my brothers, whatever they were doing. And they were hanging out with women and drinking and partying and doing whatever. Here's little man coming in and like, what's up?
Right. I want to go too. But mom remarries. When does that happen?
That's later down the road.
Okay. So I didn't know. I didn't know how long mom had stayed single.
She stayed single for a while.
So through all this, I imagine you're still going to church, right? Mom's still taking you to church?
Man, I actually did not go to church. My mom kind of fell out of church, and she actually started going to church before I got back into church, and that's when I really saw a switch. Was she actually started going to Pine Lake Church? It was when they were starting up the church, and they were meeting out of the Ridgeland High School, and she was going, and she had been going, man. She'd been knocking on my door to go. This time I'm 18. I'm off in college. She's been telling me about everything that's going on with her. And man, I just watched God do a work in her life and change her. And, I'd come home and visit her after college or, they're out for spring break or whatever. I'd come home and she would just be a different person. After watching a woman that has just been broken and go through that depression. Not only was I suffering with my suffering, she was suffering, and my brothers were suffering. So to watch her change was an inspiration to my life. And that's what really made me be like, hey, I want to go to church. So I give credit to my mom on just her relationship with Jesus and getting to know Jesus. And that's when I was like, hey, I want what you have. And, you know,
I love how you put that, because that's literally how a lot of us came to God. It's like we watch somebody else, you know, change, and you see that change and you're like, I don't know what you got, but I need it. You know, especially because mom is gone from being a family and having that father figure till now I've got to raise these 3 hooligans, these 3 boys. God bless that woman. These 3 boys by myself and try to figure it out. So you're 18 years old and you're starting to see mom's change, and then, you know, you're off at Mississippi State, which I'm not going to hold against you. So you're off at college and you see mom changing. When do you come back home? I mean, do you do your 4 years at college and then come home?
Yeah, but I was coming home a lot, you know, just on the weekends. You know, when you're broke in college, you got to get some food. So I'd come back and take my mom's food back up to college. Any home cooked meal I could get, man. You know, luckily Starkville is only an hour and a half up the road, so we'd come back anytime and see him. But I'd come back on the weekends, man, and I just started going with her. Yeah. And I think it was about year 2 in college. I started coming back every weekend. Yeah. And, you know, sometimes it was like, at first I felt like I was going to church just to be by her side, and I wasn't like really hearing anything. And you know, I guess you'd say the closer you draw, I feel like the closer you draw to God, the closer he draws to you. And that's when he started to do a work in me. And then the messages started kind of radiating with me and making sense with me. And man, I just started applying it to my life at that point.
I mean, just like the Bible says, God is the closest. Maybe it doesn't say closest, but God's close to the brokenhearted. And clearly, even though it had been, you know, 8-10 years since dad passed away, I mean, you're still brokenhearted. You're still looking for something to feel. Mm-hmm. And while you might have originally tried to fill that with, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, like I did, you eventually end up at church. So that's pretty awesome. What about your brothers? I mean, where are your brothers at this point?
My oldest brother is the CEO of our hospital in Little Rock.
No, at this point in your life.
Sorry. I thought you said
so we're between 18 and 20 now, basically?
My oldest brother is still in college, and my middle brother's in college. Me and my middle brother were roommates in college.
Now, what's going on with them? Like, I mean, are they seeing the change in mom? They starting to see a change in you? Or they coming to church too? Or does it take a little longer? Because it took
a little longer for them. I mean, obviously, you couldn't help to see the change in my mom. Right. I mean, she was like a glowing Christmas tree light going down the street, and you're like, what in the world? But and then she's sending, you know, paragraph essays to us in the morning, you know, about scripture, you know, praying for us, and you know, I started reading that. And
is that where you get it from? Because you send me a message every morning with the longest Bible readings, and I'm just like, Grady, I can't read all this right now.
They are long, but if you can get down to the meat, man, there's some good stuff in there. But I send them. I have a group of people, just people that I'm close with and people that I'm not close with, that I feel like that God lays on my heart for whatever they're walking through. I share it on my Facebook page. I don't know who reads it. You know, I had it on my wife's family. There's like a group of 18 of us. Somebody's like, why do you keep sending this? You might one day you might need it.
That's right, because one of y'all need to read this.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean that is what I love about you, is you're not afraid to share your faith no matter what. Especially, and we'll get to this, but especially as a business owner, the fact that you put God first in everything is absolutely amazing. But I just was kind of curious, is mom kind of the reason, like, why you feel the need to send these out in the mornings, is because kind of mom put that in your head, or is it just kind of coincidental?
No, I think as you grow in your faith, man, I mean, we're called here to spread the good news about Jesus. And I feel, you know, the more you read, the closer you draw to him, the more you depend on him in your daily walk, man, is the more you want to share about it to reach out to other people out there that need it. So, amen. You know, I just want everybody to have a piece of what I have. And, you know, our God is alive, and he wants to have a relationship with everybody that's walking through any obstacle in life, man, you hand it to him and walk with him each and every day, and you have that growing relationship with him. It's awesome.
That's awesome.
And that's why I share his word, because, my life changed, and I want everybody to have that same life change, that opportunity.
All right. So we're 20, 21, 22. When do we start? When do we finally start? Like, okay, I've given my life to Christ. I'm done with the drinking hardcore. I mean, because look, we're in our well, I'm in my 40s. You're getting there, and we can have a drink from time to time because that's not really something that we were ever so addicted to that we can't ever do it again. But like, when do you truly like give it up? Like, okay, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to live my life this way. I see the change in Mom, so now I know that I need a change. When does that happen?
I would say in between 19 and 20, about going into semester 3 of college. I was coming back and forth here to Madison, and I met my wife, Rachel. Well, she was my girlfriend at the time, but I met her, and we started going to church together. And
was that her idea or yours, or both?
It was both of ours. At that time I'm already in church. The church was a big priority to me. So if we're gonna start dating, we're gonna go to church, and I wanted to have a good foundation. And plus, you take your girlfriend to church. It's brownie points, right?
Yeah, and you definitely married way above your league.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that, sir. Rachel is definitely she's very, very special. She is one of those women that always has a smile on her face. You never know anything's wrong with her. It kind of scares me, if I'm being honest. Because I'm thinking like one day she might snap because like she's that happy. But she just really does bless everybody that comes in contact with her. So I could see why you'd be like, okay, you and I, we going to church.
Yeah, I mean, look, she's everything you said now, but Rachel had her side to her too. She was a little hippie.
Oh yeah,
when I met her, but God did a work in her as well, and He grew both of us. And I ended up getting baptized. I want to say around 2 years later after I met my wife, or about a year and a half later. In between that period, I got baptized as we were going to church every Sunday. God continued to do a work in us, and man, I got baptized, and that was awesome, and shared my testimony with the church. And it wasn't long after that, we got engaged and got our first little apartment, I guess you would say, we lived in. And God was still working on us and growing her. And man, I moved next door to Pine Lake's worship minister. Didn't even know that. And I just used to see that guy walking up and down the street, and I was still, I was saved, but I mean, this guy was on fire.
Right.
And I mean, he would just show up in my driveway, and I wanted to know, like, I still felt like he had something I didn't have. And that's when I started going to small groups and stuff like that. And it's not just about attending. That's when you start getting involved, and it really started to grow me spiritually.
Right.
Being in a group setting with a bunch of people.
That's pretty awesome that you were next door to the worship leader and had no idea. So when we get to the end of this, I'm going to wrap this up with a Bible verse and tell everybody what we're going to call this episode. But moving on, so we're going trauma. I like to talk about trauma because when I wrap this up, I want everybody to see what was going on during the whole thing. So our next big trauma is...
well, my wife got in a car wreck.
And she is your wife at this time, right?
She's my wife at this time.
How long y'all been married?
We've been married, I think this is going to be our 12th year, going into 13 years.
Well, he does not live. How long have you been married at that point? Danny, we're going to have to keep him on track, man.
2 years.
2 years. So we're 2 years into the marriage.
Yeah.
We don't have any kids yet.
One kid.
We do. See, I didn't realize. I did not realize.
Old.
Oh, I do remember that. Yeah. All right. So Kinsey is 6 months.
Kinsley.
Sorry. Anyway, Kinsley is 6 months old, and Mom gets in a bad car wreck.
Very bad.
So walk us through that.
Man, she was finishing up her finals at Holmes Community College at this time because I had moved back. We had moved back, and we had a 6-month-old. She had just dropped my daughter off at her grandma's so she could go take a test, and she had forgot something at the house, and she was rushing home to get whatever she needed for her test. And I was at work, and she had a head-on collision. She was in a Dodge Challenger at this time, and I want to say it was like 65 and 65 head-on collision. they had to cut her out of the car, jaws of life. You know, I get a call saying, hey, it's the police department saying, hey, your wife has just been in a serious accident. Need you to get to the hospital. I'm getting to the hospital. You know, I don't know what's going on. I'm freaking out. I beat the ambulances there, and they pull her into the ambulances. And it was at that moment I knew it was bad, but I climbed in the back of the ambulance, and I was like, hey, you know, I'm here. Are you okay? You know, and she couldn't hardly breathe, and they pushed me out of the way and pulled her into the back, and our whole family's in this waiting room, and then the doctors come in, and they say, if she makes it, and these next 2 hours are critical. So at that point, man, it was like the wind was out of the sails. I felt hopeless, and I just started praying. We all started praying in the hospital room at that point because it was up to the big man upstairs, and she had broken ribs, punctured lungs, broken bones in her legs and arms. So it was bad, and we ended up she recovered. We ended up moving in with my mother for about 6 months. And that's when also God did a work in my wife and in us. He's continuing to work through these times. Like you said, you know, during trauma and during things that happen, you know, he allows you to draw closer, you know, to you. So
he draws closer to you.
Exactly. And so Rachel started going to my mom's small group in the house. And Rachel was on a cane. She was in a wheelchair. You know, for 6 months, she couldn't walk, going in and out of rehab. My stepdad was driving her to rehab, and just that woman's small group there with my mom, the most spiritual person I know, just did an absolute miracle for Rachel's faith. And long after that, you know, she got to where we could move back into our house, and she ended up getting a job at the church. And, you know, you talk about my wife being butterfly and this, you know, just a saint. She grew into that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And through her wreck and through us and everybody that came around us and everybody that helped us through that process, and her going to work at the church, man, it just started effect to get us to where we are today.
Right.
You know?
So at this point in your life, what are we doing for a living? What are you doing for a living?
I was doing hardwood floors, construction.
So for those that don't know how Grady and I met, I'm a transportation supervisor for a company here in Pearl, Mississippi, and he owns a trucking company, and we got hooked up, and so he runs 98% of the freight for my company. But when does that transition happen? When do you leave working hardwood floors, killing yourself, to getting into transportation?
I would say it wasn't not long after my wife's wreck. I would say within a year or two mark, I wanted to get out of manual labor. And, you know, we had a newborn on the way. I was like, I can't do this the rest of my life. And, you know.
So at this point, Chloe's in the womb.
No, Kinsley was born. We had the 6 month, and then Chloe's in the womb.
When you decided to switch from manual labor to transportation.
That's correct. And I just took the first job opportunity that I had, and it was at JB Hunt Transportation Services, and I started up as a dispatcher there. And you know, I was like, I'm going to make a career out of this because it's Fortune 500 company. It's good. I was like, I'm going for it. And right. I dove all the way in and started climbing the corporate ladder there. And, you know, I could go on and bore you with this all day long. Go out there.
So during this point that you're at JB Hunt, is this when we find ourselves in massive debt?
Yes.
Okay. So like I said, I'm walking a story here, and I'm going to tie it all at the end, but I want to talk about this particular type of trauma too, because this was a huge undertaking in your life that you needed God's help with, just like losing dad, just like almost losing my wife. Mm-hmm. Now, what's going on at this point with your finances?
Well, at a lot of it was medical bills.
Yep.
You know, when my wife was hit, we didn't have health insurance on her.
Right.
So I had $90,000 in medical bills from UMC, and as well as some other, you know, newlywed stuff that you make bad decisions when you're young, dumb, I guess you would say.
You preach it to the choir, sir.
And yeah, man. So we were right a little over, right at about $100,000 or so in some serious debt, drowning.
And so what happens?
Man, I was to my breaking point one night. trying to do everything I can. I was working a full-time job. After my job, I was working other jobs, side jobs, just doing what I can. I was working probably 120 hours a week, just trying on the weekends. I mean, anything I could to make money.
Right, just trying to make a dent in this massive debt that you got, because here we are, we got a family now.
Yep.
We've got to do something.
So I just was at my breaking point. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was one night, I was feeling depressed, feeling lonely. Dude, I got down on my knees in my driveway, looked up at the sky, bawled like a kid wanting a toy in Toys R Us, man. I mean, I've never cried that hard, and just completely, not gave myself, but completely cried out for help. It was a cry for help because I didn't know what to do. It's all I could do.
Right.
And I sat out there for probably an hour or two.
Isn't it funny that our last thing that we do should have been the first thing that we do?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, for whatever reason, and it's not just you, it's not just me, it's pretty much all of us. We get to that breaking point. We've tried everything to do it on our own. And so we're like, okay, last ditch effort here. God, I'm going to give it to you. And God's like, I've been waiting on that.
Yep.
You know, if you'd have just given it to me, I'll show you, I'll take care of it. So what happens? You're over $100,000 in debt. You're literally on your knees, which I love that picture. Literally on your knees in your driveway, and you're just like, God, I cannot do this. I need you. Mm-hmm. What happens then?
Once I got myself together to go back inside, I went, and I think I took a bath, and I went to sleep. I woke up the next day, and first of the morning, I get a text from my uncle saying, your grandfather has left all you and your brothers $130,000. I was just like, what?
Hey, just real quick, do you have any more grandfathers?
They're gone, brother.
Dang. We could use that money, that kind of money, huh, Danny? So you get a call, and you know, family, uncle's like, man, you know, granddad passed away, and he's left you and your brothers $130,000, and you're just like, thank you, Jesus.
Amen.
Because like, I did not know how I was going to get us out of this debt. And so, like I said, I'm building to the end and going to explain all this and wrap it up. But like, let's move along. You now opened up your company. You know, you've left JB Hunt. You've decided, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to buy trucks. I'm going to broker loads. I'm going to be, you know, the owner. You know, yeah, you have partners and all that. And we could talk forever about, you know, what happened at the beginning of that, but we're going to leave that part out, you know, for another time. But at this point in your life, you are now the owner of, and I'm being for real this time. At this point today, you're the owner of Link Logistics, Transportation, the Lucky Town, Trucking, Transportation, whatever. So before we get into that, let's do me a favor. Let's take a break for just a second. Let's say hello to give some love to our sponsors, which one of our sponsors is Giving Grace. Check us out, givinggracemusic.com. But we'll give some love to our sponsors. We'll be right back.
Unashamed Recovery Podcast is heard around the world in over 42 countries, including over 780 cities in all 50 states here in the United States. People around the world are hearing the message of the hope of recovery from addiction, and that's because of listeners like you who donate, but also because of our sponsors. Local sponsors like D's Automotive in Meridian, Mississippi, serving the East Central Mississippi and West Alabama areas for over 42 years. D's is a name you can trust when it comes to your vehicle. For all your complete car care needs and service and towing and car locks, that's D's Automotive. Go by and see Miss Jeannie, Mike, and the boys at 5024 Poplar Springs Drive. That's 5024 Poplar Springs Drive in Meridian, or give them a call at 601-482-1800. That's 601-482-1800, and tell them that Josh and Drew sent you. Now back to your normally scheduled programming right here on Unashamed Recovery Podcast.
And we're back, and like I said before, we're sitting here with my good friend Grady Lynch, the owner of Link Logistics Transportation, which is basically, well, it's not basically, it's how we met. I'm a transportation supervisor for a company in Pearl for frozen food. He has his own trucks with a couple partners of his. They not only have their own trucks, but they also do some brokering. Trust me, you don't have to know any of that means, what I've just said, to understand what we're getting at. But in 2020, the world closes, right? Mm-hmm. And, I mean, let's be honest, the world kind of goes to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah.
And especially for transportation. Now, all of a sudden, you're deep into this. I'm the boss. I've got, yes, I've got business partners, but I'm running the day-to-day operations, and I've got these trucks. And so now not only do I have me, I have another person in the office. Wait, two other people in the office, right? Mm. I'm not going to name names because one's not with us anymore, and we'll just, maybe the other ones don't want their names listed. So we got 3 people in the office. We've also got an accounting person. Mm-hmm. So that's four families we're depending on you to make it through.
And the truck drivers. Exactly. That's what I was getting to next. So you've got a handful of truck drivers and 4 people in the office that are all depending on you to figure out how you're going to be one of the very few companies that makes it through a global pandemic. Yeah.
What happens then? Like, I mean, you're in the middle of the world of like, okay, there's nothing going on. So I'm going to assume, because I don't think we've talked at length about this, but I'm going to assume you probably might not be on your knees this time, but you're probably realizing that prayer has got you through in the past. So,
oh yeah, man, I just hard times come, and you just got to pray, and you got to, God wants to walk with you through the good times and the bad times. And this is, life is in seasons. And if you look at my life and my story as a whole, it's been a lot of seasons. And I look at this as another season, another thing that I'm going through, that I handed it with God. And, thankful for that during that time we knew each other, but we didn't really know each other like we know each other now. And, man, me and you just I think we had an honest conversation about what my business was going through, and what I can do to survive, and how we can form a partnership together. And we really leaned on each other through COVID, and it grew our relationship on a personal and professional level, as well as it also helped your company as well as it helped my company.
Right.
And then, so that was 2 years of battling through COVID that me and you got to really get to know each other, and traditions, saved my company, doing all your freight through that time, because you're essential.
Right.
And during COVID, only thing shipping was essential. So my whole book of business that was construction and you name it was shutting down, and companies were closing left and right. And, thankfully, God put you in my path, and, has allowed not only for us to be business partners, but through this time and through this journey, we've become best friends.
Right. And
it shows how he works.
Yeah, because you gotta remember, I know it's been 4 years now, but think back to the listeners I'm talking to. Think back to 2020 when you couldn't go to Walmart and find bread on the shelves because either A, everybody's freaking out, or B, the drivers aren't able to deliver it because the companies are either going out of business or, can't get anybody to ship. Luckily, I'm working for a company that's frozen foods for senior citizens, Meals on Wheels type programs. And so, yeah, we're essential. And the beautiful thing about our relationship at the beginning and what God was setting up, in my opinion, was the fact that, okay, Palmer, you're a Christian and this is a Christian. And so it's like, you could probably go out and find cheaper rates from somebody else, but, are you going to is it going to be another faith follower? Is it going to be another one of my children that is trying to do things the right way? And for me, it was no. Like, there's a bunch of other Christian brokers out there and other Christian companies, but we had already kind of established a friendship and a relationship. And I just, my boss at the time, both of us just agreed, like, okay, this is the company that we need to stick with, because they're going to treat us the right way. They're going to continue to treat us right because we're all Christians, and we know what Jesus would do, www, what would Jesus do? Well, he would, partner with somebody that believes the same things that he did. So here we are. We finally make it through the pandemic, quote unquote, because here we are 4 years later. And unfortunately, things are not great in our economy. And so we're still in a situation where it's like, hey man, if you don't continue to partner with this person who's done you right, then this company could go out of business, And so how scary is that for you as a business owner?
Man, I think as a business owner, you're always thinking about the worst case or the what ifs. But the one thing, that I've learned is I can't worry about the what's. I just got to give those to God. And at times you're going to battle with the flesh. You're going to battle with yourself. But anytime I start having those negative thoughts, I go to prayer. Yeah. And that's what helps me get through it.
So we've shown a pattern here where it's like things are going bad, real bad. And I've prayed and God has delivered. He's never forsaken me. He's taken care of me.
It's true.
All we've talked about is the trauma. Well, I think we should start to land this plane by talking about the blessings as well. So October, right?
Yeah.
About October, you kind of find this property that is on the water, and that's kind of been your dream, to live on the water. You've got a boat and a beautiful family that loves to be near the water. And so you find this property that is in foreclosure and you're like, man, I really want this property. And you start going through the process of trying to get this property. And it feels like every door that could be closed along the way is closed. But in that situation, in all that situation, did you feel like God was telling you this is your house? I'm going to give it to you?
Absolutely. Especially through friends and family. And I mean, like just like you say, I send those messages out to everybody. I mean, you walked with me through the whole process and how I was feeling and battling myself. We had been trying to buy this property since October of 2023. That's a long time. And it seemed like,
and we're in, just for context, we're in May of 2024.
Exactly. And it was like every way I turned, like you said, we ran into something different. And this was something that we just continued to pray about. We felt like it was ours. We went through and the realtor called us and they said, you in the foreclosure, you go through a bidding process. And they said, best and final offer. We walked through, we're meeting the contractors, making sure we know what we're getting ourselves into. We gave our best and final offer and we got beat out. And then we're still praying about it, like something could happen, right?
Right. And Grady's coming to me this whole time being like, man, we got beat out. I guess it's not going to happen because, I mean, look, you had tried this before as well. You wanted to move down to the coast. You found a beautiful property. We're going to build a house. No, you found a house, found a beautiful property down there, beautiful house. You're like, man, this is my dream. I love being on the coast, love being near the water. My family just feels so much connected when we're down there, just spending time with each other. Man, this is what I want. And then that falls through. And then you find this property and God, and you feel like God's gone, okay, I didn't want you there. This is your property. And you're like, okay, thank you, God. This is amazing. And then you get bid out. And at that point you go, man, Palmer, I don't know what to do. And I'm just like, man, I feel like this is your property. Like, I feel God's been telling you this is your property the whole time.
Well, he wasn't only telling, you that. He was telling my mom. He was telling my wife was like, this is our house. Even my daughter was like, this is our house. And, this whole time, we going through and I had a dream. I had a dream that it was about the house. It wasn't long after we got beat out. And it was a couple that I walked in the house and they were looking at the house and I was walking through it, showing them all the stuff that was wrong with it in my dream. And they were like, oh, we didn't know that. But there was this awesome stereo system in this house. And for whatever reason, I was attracted to the stereo system and I wanted it. And then the ambulances came in my dream and we all woke up. Well, it was funny you say that. I mean, I say that because it wasn't a couple of weeks later. We're still praying about the house as a family. And the realtor calls my realtor back and says, hey, the couple had an inspection on the house. And then after they realized everything that was wrong with it, they wanted like $100,000 off the asking price or whatever. And we backed out. If your client still wants it, to, put their offer back in.
So just as a side note, like, do you remember what they looked like in the dream?
No.
Dang.
But the stereo system in this house was sick.
Is there a stereo system in the house?
There's something in it.
I guess we're getting a stereo system.
I guess so.
The only reason I ask about the couple is because I'm like, man, wouldn't it be awesome if like you remembered what they looked like and they actually were the couple that turned it down?
That would have been crazy.
That would be crazy. All right, so you submit another offer. You're like, okay, let me walk back through this house again. Let me get my father-in-law out here. Let's check some more stuff out. Mm-hmm. Here's my best offer. You give it to him. Mm-hmm. What happens then?
Well, the communication lag between the investment group that owned the property and the closing attorney or the decision maker took forever, I guess you say. So if I said something today, it would be next week before they would reply. So that's part of the reason why it took so long for this process to work out. But basically, they accepted our offer, and it took forever to get the contract. Finally got, we're still praying through this process and they finally get the contract. And then you have, we run into liens, property liens. So originally they wanted to use their closing attorney. We wanted to use our closing attorney. The reason they wanted to use theirs is because they were trying to pass these liens on to somebody else. And this is in February at this point, and my church is doing what's called a P28 challenge. It's where you pray every day at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And my whole family decided to do this P28. Me, my daughters, we set an alarm on my phone, and we're all praying for the house.
Right.
And through this whole process, we're running into liens from the HOA. We're running into liens from Pearl River Valley. I mean, the water company, it's lease land, so you have that. I mean, anywhere you turn, you have yard liens. You think of it. So the whole process is drawing out. We're continuing to pray. Man, I even got to a plea of help where I reached out to everybody in my my contact list. Of course, you probably got tired of me talking about it at this point because it was a daily battle of like, right. Man, I feel like God is speaking to me. He's told, my kids having dreams. I've had 2 dreams. I've had dreams. I feel like it's our house.
Yeah, like God, you told me that this is our house, man. Like, what are we doing?
And every time I'm coming to you, you're lifting me up, which I'm thankful for, telling me, hey, man, it's your house. You got this. And I strictly remember we were trying to get a closing date. They got the liens cleared up, and we're trying to get a closing date. Our closing just kept getting pushed back 5 or 6 times. And I got on Facebook, and I normally don't do this, and I just asked for prayers, because we had been praying, and I asked for prayers, called my mom, solid rock, my mom, she's always got my back. I call her, and I just poured into her about like what I was feeling, and doubt kind of started creeping in. And this is weeks ago at my office, and she prayed for me on the phone. I went back and sat at my desk, and I just sat there in quiet. After she prayed, I went and prayed again, and I heard God speak to me, and all I heard was, I am the Alpha, the Omega. That's all I heard. Does
it sound like James Earl Jones? Because that's what I suspect God sounds like.
Man, through my walk and Christian journey, there's different ways that I feel like he speaks or interacts with us. It could be somebody in your life. It could be, it's not necessarily like a crazy voice, but it's almost like you're talking to yourself, but it's not you talking to yourself. Yeah, or it could be a feeling or something like that. It's
usually something that you probably wouldn't have said to yourself. Like I told you the story, I was fasting and looking for answers, and I just heard in my head as clear as day is, you'll have your answer today.
Yeah.
And I did, but like I wouldn't have said that to myself because I didn't know when the answer was going to come.
Yeah.
So, and it's like you said, it's good that you said that because, a lot of people really do. And I say it jokingly, that did you hear the voice of James Earl Jones? But, a lot of people do not hear God audibly. It's not, just sitting in this room and all of a sudden Grady, the house is yours.
Exactly.
It's usually, thought in your head, in your heart that you feel.
But I mean, I'll say this, that, through every hard time that I've had in my life, I feel like God uses the hard times to draw you closer to him, because you're leaning on him. You're leaning on something or someone or him to, to get you through that. And the how, my father, the father, that was pain, and it grew me. My wife's wreck, that was pain. It grew us as a couple. The people everybody that came into my life, this whole process, he's still growing me each and every day. And, it's drawn me closer to him, to where I messaged you here, this week, telling you about how my devotion and everything's changed in the hot tub, about how, just praying for this house, how I've been praying. It's just grown me spiritually.
So how I kind of want to end this episode is, I know that we talked about trauma, and then I'm sure somebody's out there listening and going, okay, I get the whole death of dad. I get the whole almost lost my wife, but like, really, you're going to tell me about a house, and that's traumatic. But here's the deal. When you are walking with Christ, he never said, in fact, he point blank says, this is not going to be an easy road for you. They hated you. They're going to hate me. And what I've learned, and what most of us have learned, is there's a spiritual world that we're not seeing, and it's always in battle. There's always entities from the enemy that are always trying to interact with us, whisper in our ear lies and stuff like that. So even though, okay, we made it through the death of dad, we made it through almost losing our wife, now here it is, I'm asking for God to give me a blessing, and I feel like God said, I'm going to give this to you. Man, it was still hard to stay strong, because there was a door, a wall, an enemy, entity continuing to mess with you, giving you that doubt. And so the reason I wanted to do those particular stories in your life is because it all revolves around prayer. I got through the death of dad because mom found Christ, and through mom finding Christ, I found Christ. And so I'm praying, now I've got my life right because of prayer and because of my relationship with God. I almost lose my wife, and I got through that because of prayer. I almost, so it's 4 stories. I'm sorry. I almost, I'm over my head in debt, and I got on my knees and I prayed. Now I'm asking for a huge blessing, and I got on my knees and I prayed.
And then
transportation. I got on my knees and prayed. I made it through 2020 because I got on my knees and I prayed. And so today's episode is titled Answered Prayers. And the verse that I want to talk about is something that my preacher actually talked about on Wednesday at our life group, and that's John 15, verse 7. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want, and it will be granted. Now, you can't take that verse out of context. Okay, you cannot go to God and be like, God, I want a mansion and 60 cars and lots of money and stuff like that. Will he give it to you? Maybe. There's preachers out there that have all that, and maybe their life is right. Maybe it's not. That's not for me to judge. But what he's saying in this verse is, if you remain in me and I remain in you. And what that means is our lives with him are so connected, and we're so in tune that we know God's will for us. Because we're listening, we're hearing him talking, we're reading his word, we're remaining in him, and his words that we're reading, we're taking in. We're keeping it in our heads. We're keeping it in our hearts and in our lives. And so his word remains in us. When you're that connected to the Father, whatever you ask for is actually something he wants to give you already anyway. And so like you said, man, you're like, God, we've been faithful, and we've prayed, and we know you want to, I'm not a prosperity type preacher type person, but he does want you to prosper. He does want good things for you. And so you go to him and you're like, God, I really want this house, and he says, son, that house is yours. Now, why did he say that? Because you remain in him and his words remain in you. You're so connected to the Father right now, especially because of this, hardship of not knowing whether you're going to get this blessing that you want, that you really dug deep and dived deep. And God's like, he had already told you,
Yeah.
Grady, I'm going to give it to you. And you could have been like, you could have stood on that right there, then and there, and been like, okay, I'm good. Instead, what'd you do? Because it got a little hard, you're like, I know I heard you, God. I know you told me this is mine. And so you're like, you know what? I need to dive deep. I need to dive deeper. I need this relationship to grow, because that's what our faith is. It's not religion. It's relationship.
Yep.
And so even though God had already said, I'm going to give this to you, you dug deep and you remained in him. His words remained in you. And whatever you asked for came to fruition. Now you got this beautiful house. Now, do you have to do some work on this house to make it the dream house? Yeah, because it was a foreclosure. And you're putting in the sweat equity and making it happen. But you're continuing to grow your faith and your family's faith, your friends' faith, all because God promised you something and you stayed strong. And I cannot stress that enough, that you remained in him and he remains in you. His words remain in you. The fruit that you're bearing right now and able to show the world is because you were obedient. And I think that's where a lot of people fail, me included. How obedient are you willing to be during the struggle? How obedient are you willing to be when things don't look right? I went through my own situation, a couple weeks ago, still going through it today. And, got my answer, and I didn't like it. Maybe I should have prayed a little more specifically. But what I love about you and your walk with Christ is that dream house that you wanted in down at the coast. And he said, nah, this ain't it. You didn't let it lose your faith. You didn't let it take away your faith. When you almost lost Rachel, you didn't let it take away your faith. When the world went to hell in a handbasket in 2020, you didn't let it take away your faith. I've got a friend who within the last couple of years lost his son, and then 6 months later lost his dad. Didn't let it take away his faith. Preacher that was at our church the other day, Alan Hawkins, he lost his son to the same thing you lost your dad to, and he didn't let it take away his faith. And so the message of today's episode is the power of prayer and answered prayers and staying within God's will for you. Now, how do we know what God's will is? It's very simple. God just wants to have a relationship with you. People get so caught up on, well, it's God's will for me to be here, you're watching the video. Let me point at myself real quick. It's God's will for you to be a rock star. No, God's will for you is to just be in relationship with him. And then he'll show you the path to take. Was God's will for you to be in trucking? I don't know. But you ended up there, and he's kept you there because of your faith with him. You're remaining in him, and he's remaining in you. So real quick, that's kind of my spiel of today's episode, answered prayers. And verse of the day, John 15:7, remain in him, and his words remain in you, and anything you ask will be given to you. With all that being said, the floor is yours. Is there anything first and foremost, I also want to say that, once again, the company that Grady has is Link Logistics. If you're listening to this and you have any transportation needs, whether it's dry, whether it's reefer, whether it's LTL, whether it's whatever, Link Logistics can help you. I know that for a fact because they do 98% of my business. I also want to shout out your wife's business, Hometown Signature. I should know that since I have like 57 ads from her. But she does all kind of customizable products. I think I said that right. So you can check both those companies out on Facebook. Hometown Signature for customized products like hats, shirts, cutting boards, all kinds of things like that. Link Logistics. You can look them up on Facebook as well. Grady, is there anything else you want to tell our listeners? The
one thing I wanted to circle back on was, there's so many people that, are going through life without a father.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to say is you don't have to have an earthly father to lean on, your heavenly father.
Right.
And through my walk, I now know that father that I was searching for was always there. I just needed to get to know him. And
say that again. Put that on a T-shirt.
I know, right? But and now I have a heavenly Father, and it's earthly fathers are great and they're here to lead, but those out there that don't have a father, and you're out there, doing drugs or doing whatever to try to cope with that, start leaning on your heavenly Father, because he desires a relationship with you. He's for you.
I mean, look, let's be honest. Like we said earlier, going to God is usually the last stitch effort. What do you have to lose? If you're listening to this podcast and you're doing drugs or alcohol or sex or whatever it is because you don't have the life that you thought you were supposed to have, you've lost your father, you've lost your mother, you've lost your spouse or whatever the case may be, and you're going through hell in a handbasket, what else do you have to lose? Why not try God? Give him a try. Let's see what happens.
God used to be my lastest effort.
Right.
As I've grown, now he's my first.
Right.
He's the first step I go.
Yeah.
And that has completely transformed my life and got me to where I am today. I mean, I could go on and on about God stories.
And that is what's absolutely amazing about your story, is that you could walk the entire story that we just walked and see the growth. And we could sit here all day and talk about all the other little things that happen, but I feel like touching base on those 5 big things that happened in your life in the last 20 years truly proves that prayers work, that God answers prayers. But the caveat to that is you have to remain in him and he has to remain in you. And then whatever you ask, he'll give you, because he already wanted to give it to you anyway. Yeah. So with that being said, once again, I want to say thank you so much to Daniel here at Audio Alchemy. It's a beautiful studio if you cannot see. If you're just listening to this and you're not actually watching it, you have no idea what you're missing except for the ugly mug that's talking. The studio is amazing, and it's always a pleasure to be here. Grady, thank you so much for joining me today on this special edition of Unashamed Recovery Podcast. And
Thank y'all for tuning in to today's episode of the podcast. I hope you have found it helpful and encouraging. And if you're still listening and you're still in that darkness of addiction, I hope that today's topic has been a lighthouse guiding you out of that pit and into the hope of sobriety and recovery.
For more recovery content, visit our brand new website, unashamedrecovery.com. There you will find addiction resources, new and old episodes of the show, plus sobriety and faith recovery themed blogs to take you deeper into your sobriety and recovery journeys. You can even donate to the show to help us reach more people still lost in the darkness of addiction.
Also, check out more amazing recovery podcasts over at Take 12 Recovery Radio Recovery Podcast Network. That link is in the show notes as well as under our partners page on the new website.
And that is all for this episode. Remember to stay sober, and above all else, to keep on 12th stepping as you stay
Unashamed.
We love you.
See you guys.
See you guys. Peace.